All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Super Freak. I am your host, Talia. How are we all doing out there? So I want to talk today about dismantling control through a quantum psychosomatic lens. If you're new to me, hello, welcome. You can read a little bit about what I do and what this platform is all about on the website taliaverse.com. I encourage you all to get into the Substacks and read those, read them on a VO, lots of good stuff there. Without further ado, though, let's jump in. Okay, so I want to talk today about control because there's a lot of questions coming in specifically with running up against a threshold. Okay, you are all kind of moving through something, right? We're all moving through something all the time. And you're up against yourselves in very specific ways. And if you've been in frequency work for a while, then you're really moving through pressure, okay? Patterns under pressure. And they get really pressurized when the prediction strategies that you have been running, your nervous systems have been running, are starting to fail. Okay, there's a failure error. There's an error code. And that's why you're feeling the pressure so intensely, is because the way that your body is trying to resolve the patterns right now are no longer congruent with who you are becoming. That is where the dissonance lies, and the decoherence becomes incredibly insufferable, actually. You get very uncomfortable in your body when you're really up against pattern pressure. And usually, if you've taken the quiz, then you have likely fallen into three categories: either control and sacrifice, self-abandonment, okay, or lack and worthiness. Those are the two. And I'm going to talk more about kind of isolating behavior as the weeks go on, because I think we need to start slowing everything down a bit and becoming very, very focused on a single behavior with a single pattern in a single area of our lives. Because I can talk about, quantum coherence all day long and perceptual coherence all day long and the mechanics of that. But if you're having a hard time applying it to your life, then what is kind of the point? The information is interesting, but we need practical application. So today, this episode will be dedicated to that. Hopefully, you guys will be able to take away some questions and have some more practical tools to help you dismantle some of this stuff. So let's get into control. So control is often misunderstood as a desire for power. More often, however, it is a response to prediction failure. Okay, your nervous system is a prediction machine. Your brain is a prediction machine. And in efforts to try to constantly resolve itself, it will run into some type of error code and a failure. So every living system is attempting to maintain coherence. To do this, it continuously generates predictions about itself, other people, and the environment that you're in. When those predictions are repeatedly violated through trauma, instability, incongruence, abandonment, betrayal, chaos, inconsistency, etc., the system adapts. Okay, so control emerges as a compensatory mechanism. So the nervous system learns, if I can anticipate everything, manage everything, monitor everything, and influence outcomes, I can reduce uncertainty and prevent pain. Because no one wants to feel the way we've all felt, likely as children, confused, looking around, wanting safety, wanting relational co-regulation, and we don't have it. We haven't experienced it. And we are incredibly sophisticated as a technology human. So we will start creating workarounds instantly from a very early age. And then that will be epigenetically influenced from our family lines. So from a QP perspective, control is not a pattern. Control is the symptom. Okay? So the pattern actually exists beneath that. And usually, so you have a pattern that accommodates a prediction that gets experienced as a symptom. And usually the deeper pattern or prediction will look like, I am not safe when I don't know. I'm not safe when others have power. I am responsible for outcomes always. Chaos leads to loss. Relaxation leads to vulnerability and instability and is therefore not safe. Trust creates danger. And over time, these predictions become embodied. They are no longer merely thoughts. They become physiological expectations encoded through perception, emotion, behavior, and autonomic regulation. And then the body begins scanning for confirmation. And your brain utilizes RAS, so your reticular activating system, to look for confirmation bias. Okay? It starts to look for ways to prove to me that these things are not safe. And then your body, your frequency will start to generate and accommodate that level of coherence, and then produces the energy out into the world, the frequency. Okay, it generates the frequencies that will therefore be accommodated in your life. That's why you will continue to control, all right? Or you continue to be attracted to people, places, and things and situations, circumstances that accommodate control, which becomes very ironic and very frustrating because it's upholding and reinforcing the very pattern that you are working so hard to try to dismantle. So let's put a pin in this really quick. And I talk about this in the Field Hub and the Pattern Lab at different degrees. But if you were going to put who you are, okay, define who you are in a single word, what would that word be? And this could be resilient, flattened, confused, devotion, right? Or let's say you want to talk to a version of you that you're tuning into. What is that version? All right, if you were going to define who you are as a type of person, who would that be? And in one word. Write that down. Grab your journal, grab a pen, or just say it in your head if you're listening to me walking. That right there is incredibly instructive. That data is going to tell you what your main strategy is, the main prediction that you're running, the main nervous system intelligence that you're reinforcing. Like, let's say it's resilience, okay? Then you will be met with people, places, and things that are constantly going to reinforce that belief about yourself. I'm incredibly resilient. So you're going to be up against just nonstop challenge. Nonstop. There will not be, like, if you're incredibly resourceful, then you will be met with people, places, circumstances that force you to be resourceful in order to get out of situations, either time constraints, financial constraints, etc. If you have, let's say, devotion, okay, love and devotion in your field, let's say that's how you see yourself, then you will constantly be met with people, places, and things that are going to challenge that and make that difficult. Like, why is it so hard for people to be devoted to me? Why is it so hard for people to love me? Okay, because the idea is for you to regulate around and move into understanding the pattern that's causing all of these strategies, to resolve the error code, to create a new prediction. So for me, if I want my main word, okay, if I feel like my word is presence, and I truly want that to be an embodied experience, then I too will be met with people, places, and things, and challenges and situations where I am forced to be very present. Back-to-back delayed flights, a challenging reactive fight-based nervous system in the people that I'm relating to around me, delays, right? Time constraints. How present can I be? How much can I surrender? How much can I let go of control in this moment? So let's go back now to why control. So control works well to survive, but it works really poorly to live. The problem is that control can only manage known variables. So life continuously introduces unknown variables. as the challenge. Do you see the paradox? Okay. So the more a person attempts to control uncertainty, the smaller their world becomes. Let me just say kind of some of that again, if I can remember it. The more a person attempts to control uncertainty, the smaller their world becomes. Relationships become transactions, safer. Okay, faith just becomes a strategy, safer. Phoned in, lukewarm. Okay, love becomes monitoring, safer. Success becomes exhaustion, also safer. Symptoms become something you hypermanage, safer. The prediction remains intact because your system never experiences the thing it fears and survives it. You need to move through the thing that you think you fear and survive it so the system, your system, knows a different experience. This is what embodied living is all about. So we often go through questions like, you've done so much work. How did you allow this person to come into your life? How did this even happen? How did I get here? ... Okay? Because part of your nervous system needs to relive the prediction error code from an awakened perspective so your body knows a different experience. Then the code doesn't it doesn't run into an error. It resolves itself and stays active, okay, but it stays active and resolved because, as we know, energy doesn't ever end, right? It just transmutes and transforms, and it stays in a resting state with no charge. So if you are moving through, let's say, abuse or victim or control or sacrifice, and you really start to get a handle of embodying this stuff, like reliving it really, really quickly without the level of intensity. Let's say if you had a severe abuse and you're moving through like kind of some last phantom imprints of it, some structural echoes. And let's say the abuse pattern now just shows up as a moment where you could have said something, but you didn't. So there was a slight delay in setting a boundary, but the collateral damage wasn't nearly as catastrophic in terms of bringing up all of this shame and collapse as it would have been in a really, really reactive version of that pattern. So you start to have, it starts to have less and less and less of an impact in your field until eventually you do not need to experience, let's say, that level of abuse or any kind of abuse, or you don't need to control in order to feel safe. Your system doesn't have to organize around control. You can organize around presence, around surrender and softening and going with the flow and being dynamic and moving with the field as it evolves more comfortably. You don't have to know what's going on. You don't have to create a symptom in order to manage it. You don't have to keep questioning what you're doing. You don't have to continue to collapse into flattening and then question your purpose and your direction in life and wonder why this is all happening to you in order for you to feel safe. So the dismantling process for control specifically is not forcing surrender. It's exposing the prediction underneath the behavior. So the question shifts from why am I controlling to what am I predicting will happen if I stop? So that's the question that reveals the architecture there, the architecture and the mechanism, which I actually love talking about it because it's about getting down to origin of stuff. So not the behavior itself, but like the underlining structure. So once the prediction becomes conscious, once you become aware of what you typically do, like if I'm in a situation in relational dynamics, like we're just with people, okay, and something is said to me that threatens my competency. This is a former version of me, okay? If something came in and threatened my competency, I would get extremely defensive and reactive. I would shut down, prove the person wrong at any lengths, get into an intellectual battle of some kind, ensure my rightness, and then run. Shut down, flight. That's a nervous system that has never learned to be attuned to discomfort or dissonance, right? Like if I had attunement early on and learned how to regulate myself and was able to hold my nerve in the face of someone challenging me directly, then I wouldn't have to run that level of strategy over and over and over and over again. So now, because I've moved through it, I can sense it so fast, so easily. You can read people this way. This is how you start reading reality. You start seeing where people are coming from. You see the architecture that they're running. You start seeing the strategies that they're protecting, that their nervous systems and their bodies are protecting. And you don't hold them in contempt. Okay, you can see them for who they are without the judgment and still hold your own nerve and come from a place where you're protecting what you feel and how you see things without feeling like you have to defend it. You can kind of move into more reflective questioning. Like, that's interesting what you just said to me. Like, what did you hear that I said? I'm just curious because that's not what I said exactly. You heard it. I'm feeling that you heard what I said differently. So what did you hear? You can kind of move into a different set of questioning without it becoming defensive. So in my case, I would control to keep myself safe. And the behavior was very prediction based. You almost can feel where the conversation is going to go and how a person is going to behave based on what you're going to say, because you can feel their strategies and so succinctly. So I'll say that. I say that because once the prediction becomes conscious, the work is no longer about eliminating control. Okay, so the question doesn't come like, how do I get rid of control? It becomes about updating the model, generating the need for control. This is why it gets really uncomfortable. Control is the hardest one to unravel for a lot of people because it really fossilizes the system. It's so good at helping you move through stuff. It's so effective and so efficient that it becomes something you have to ask yourself, like, do you want to actually be free of control? Do you want that? Because you will be a different person, and the relearning process will be challenging. You'll be in a void a bit while you repixelate. Okay, your body reorganizes around something else. So, for example, okay. So let's say your system learns through direct experience. All right. So if you're moving through prediction and the work for you is no longer about eliminating control, but becoming aware of updating the model, generating the need for it, then you would want to learn through direct experience that uncertainty is survivable, that outcomes can differ from predictions. Okay, it's not going to threaten your constitution or your identity, that safety can exist without constant management, that presence can replace vigilance, and that trust can coexist with discernment. So the paradox here that I'm asking you to hold without collapsing into either side is this: control is an attempt to guarantee the future. But life requires participation in the unknown. So the more conscious a system becomes, the less energy it spends forcing outcomes and the more energy it spends responding to reality as it unfolds. Okay? And it's not because you stopped caring about everything and you just collapse into affect. It's because your nervous system no longer mistakes prediction for truth. So control loosens when your system discovers something greater than certainty, which is the capacity to remain coherent even when certainty is unavailable. And that's the master flex. So this would be the part where I want you guys just to maybe grab a pen or paper and start to write some of this stuff down, because I'm going to give you like a pattern diagnostic practice. And then I'll likely make this available either on the site or on Substack. And if you want a copy of it, then ping me on social and I'll get you this. And then for the membership folks, I'll definitely make sure you have it. So first, if you're up against a trigger, okay, up against something like you really want to move through control and feelings, right? How do I get rid of this control? How do I, I'm so afraid of people's perceptions of me, but then I don't care at the same time. And so you're constantly managing and self-editing, okay? Like you're going to write all that down. Then you're going to locate it in the body. Where is it sitting? And put your hand there and witness it. The second thing I want you to do is inventory all of this stuff. Write it out, all of it, no editing. Where is your body responding? So again, the location, the intensity, and then put your hand there and just witness it. Where did you first learn this? M line, P line. How many lines back did this go? Who was the first person to control in your family? What did that control look like for them? How did you learn that? Is this yours or you did inherit it? How far does the root system reach? Number 3, what story are you telling yourself? This is the meaning you made from the trigger. Okay. I don't know how to let go of control. It's always going to be this way. If I don't control, then everybody loses their shit. Things don't get done, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Those are not the facts. That's the interpretation. So the brain is immediately, because it doesn't have any concept of time, it only knows what you're aware of. So because the brain doesn't know what's in the past, present, or future, it doesn't know what a threat is. So it's looking for you to create meaning. That's the third part. What story are you telling yourself? What does that story predict? Where does that story already go? Always go. What's the arc? Okay, write down your entire fear list here, because all of it boils down to that. So every outcome the story is bracing for. Empty it completely onto a piece of paper. Is there a theme present? What is your usual response from here? This is the automatic move. What does the pattern do when it's running the show? Every time X happens, Y is experienced. Now you should be able to see the pattern. Like, what is the pattern? Underneath control is this. Name it. Naming creates separation. You are not the pattern. You are the one observing it. Okay? 7, what is the pattern protecting you from? The original fear underneath the behavior, and then ask the harder question, if I let this pattern go, who will I need to become? Right? If this pattern goes away, who am I? Then declare your willingness to release it. I am willing to release this pattern. I'm willing to become who I need to be. Okay, it's an actual consent to change. Then surrender it. This is where God enters the chat. Okay, I release this need to control how I see myself. I was seen before I was, formed. This is all divinely influenced. I'm learning to be more connected to something greater than myself. You can turn this over to your highest. You can turn this over to God. You can turn this over to source. And if that doesn't feel like it's accessible to you, then take it to a witness. This might be in session with me. It might be with a dear friend. Like, hey, can I just share kind of some stuff I'm moving through? And just, can you listen? Can you witness me and offer reflection? When you take it to a witness and you start sharing how you're really feeling, it really penetrates the vulnerability firewall that most of us put up. You'll start to experience something else, which is this emotion and this softness and this tenderness of being witnessed by somebody who you trust and you love. And all they have to do is listen and then offer some reflection. Is there a pattern or a behavior or something in the character that you think I'm missing? See if you can take the reflection of that, and then you take both of those things to your highest, to God. You take all of it in some way. Pray about it, meditate on it. You can do a ritual. But usually with me, I sit with myself. I see what is the truth of this situation that I'm moving through. Where's the through line in pattern and behavior? What is the prediction? What is that prediction trying to protect? I no longer want that running in me. And what am I willing to actually do now in order for that to be removed from me? I want this pattern set to resolve. Okay, so what do I have to do in order for this pattern to be resolved? Write it down, get very clear on the inventory aspect of all of this, the story that you tell yourself. What's the traditional outcome? You know how you traditionally behave. You kind of know how situations usually go. So if you can catch yourself before that loop completes and you can grab it, take a moment, kind of move into the 3Bs, like just breathe and regulate first, break or interrupt the automatic response, and then go below. Go underneath the surface and ask yourself those questions, because you're not resolving a problem. You're just returning to yourself. The codes don't want to continue running error. Okay, all of these patterns and behaviors and underlining structures want to actually resolve themselves. That pressure wants relief. It needs witness and presence. This is what embodiment actually is. And then you can anchor back into your body through contrary action. And although it might be shaky, you might have a kind of like a nervous system kind of off-gassing or discharge, but your body's going to know a different experience. It's going to actually have proof that uncertainty isn't exile. Okay, you're not going to die. And a lot of that stuff is epigenetically informed, and that's more advanced work, and I can certainly support you that in the lab and the field hub. But this is essentially where we get started with all of this stuff. And very few people have the tenacity to stick with it, but it's worth it, because eventually you're just up against different versions of yourself. And right now it's very, very loud and it's extremely noisy. And if you can cut out all of that and go right to God with this stuff, with really solid coherence, modeling, witness, and guides around you, again, I do my best to be a resource for you in that, then you will see change. It is inevitable, because it's just the physics of this stuff. Okay, let's see. What else do I want to say about that? I think it would be helpful to maybe, let's do a little bit more of an exercise. So the surface level or layer would look like this. Where in my life am I currently trying hardest to maintain control? What behaviors do I use to create a sense of certainty? What situations make me feel the most uncomfortable when I cannot control the outcome? So that's the surface layer there. Your prediction layer would look like this. What am I afraid will happen if I stop controlling this? What outcome am I unconsciously trying to prevent? What future event am I acting as though I already know will occur? What prediction is my control attempting to validate or avoid? And then the meaning is going to come in. When did I first learn that controlling outcomes was necessary? What experience taught me that uncertainty was dangerous? Who was unable, unwilling, or unavailable, causing me to become responsible for what was not mine? Where are all of my hypervigilant girlies out there? What assignment did I take on that required me to become hypervigilant, responsible, or self-protective? And then your identity layer would kind of look like this. Who would I be without this pattern of control? What part of my identity depends on being the one who manages, fixes, anticipates, protects constantly all the time? What would become possible if I no longer organized my life around preventing pain? Okay, what if I could just surrender and soften and go with the flow? Wouldn't that be nice? If I had to choose one question, okay, if you had to choose, let's say, one question, it would be this to answer out of all the things that I just said. What prediction is my need for control protecting me from having to disprove? Okay, what prediction is my need for control protecting me from? That would be a great question to ask all of it. Either that can be lack or my worthiness, okay? Or, because you're really looking to answer three things. What's the pattern? What is the prediction? And what is the meaning making behind it? If you can answer those three things about a very specific behavior, all right, that's accommodating a certain pattern, that's accommodating a very specific prediction, then you have a pretty good handle on the way your system has been organized. So if you are constantly managing symptoms and body pain, okay, what are you afraid of? What is constant symptom management protecting you from? Those would be very curious questions. I'd be very curious to know the answer to some of those questions. And those are the types of things that you would bring into sessions, which, by the way, I have some available in the coming weeks. And of course, I'm available for you in the memberships, the Field Hub, the Pattern Lab. Great group of people in there really doing some very important work. We're all in this together. So please utilize these podcasts ideally as ways and guide on your journey to self-mastery, becoming home to yourself. And of course, I have the Substacks and working on being a little bit more available on social, but of course I've got you in the DMs. And I think that's where I will leave this episode for this week. Blessings, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.